I start this morning at the end of our series with a gift. Do you like a gift this morning? You don't sound like you like a gift. When Oprah came out, when she had her show and she had gifts, they were a little more excited about it. Of course, she was giving cars and things like that away, but anyway, I have a gift for you. If I could have our ushers just go around. It's actually not very costly at all, but it is very thoughtful. Okay? What I'm giving you is a bookmark. So for those of you guys who don't tend to read a lot, just don't put it in a book that you're never going to read. Just keep it close to you, someplace where you're going to be able to see this on a relatively frequent basis. And what this bookmark is it's a review of our last 8 weeks in this series. And at each point along the way, it gives you the practice that I invited you into every week when we were looking at what it means to have a happy life. Because I would imagine that from week 1 to week 8 that you may have forgotten a few things. And I don't want you to forget these practices because all of you, I would imagine, desire a happier life than the one you have. And one of the things that we talked about is that it's one thing to know something, but it's another thing to do it. And so each of these practices are helpful for you aligning your life with Christ. We often say here at Grace that there is this partnership between us and God for transformation, in order for transformation to occur. We have to create the conditions for transformation. We have to put ourselves in a place where it can occur, but ultimately God's the one who helps to do that. And so each of these practices on the bookmark that you're going to be getting is a reminder of those things that you can give yourself to on a daily basis so that you can increase your happiness quotient in life. So that is my gift to you as we end this series. And I hope it will be helpful to you long after we are done. As they continue to hand those out, I just want us to stay on the topic for a second of gifts. Okay? I want you to think with me about some of the greatest gifts you have ever received. Just think back over the course of your life. And as I share with you a few, maybe some will come to mind. One time I was given this baseball. I'm a Red Sox fan. Most of you who know me know that. And after years and years of not breaking through and winning the World Series, in 2004 they won the World Series. And shortly after they did that, I had this baseball that was left in my office. And all of the players on the team had signed the baseball, and it was there as a gift for me, celebrating the championship that they had finally broke through and won. To this day, I don't know who gave me that baseball. It's one of the greatest gifts I've ever had. I have it at home. It's on sort of like a trophy stand, and it's in one of my boys' rooms. But I treasure that gift. Also, when I turned 40, it was just a couple of years ago, this church actually gifted me, knowing that one of my dreams was to go to Greece. And on my 40th birthday, this church gave me the resources for myself and my wife to actually go. And we spent almost 2 weeks in Greece, actually following sort of the footsteps of Paul's second missionary journey, going to a variety of different places. It was absolutely one of the best gifts I have ever received. How about you? When you think about gifts, it might not come in the form of a baseball or a trip. It might come in some other way. But without sharing that, I just want you to get in touch with what it is that you were given once upon a time. It might be recent. It could be a long time ago. But I want you to think about those gifts that you treasure and why it is that you treasure them. For me, the common denominator when I think about the things that I value the most that have been given me is that it comes at the expense or sacrifice of the one who gave me the gift. I have mentioned this several times over the course of the last many years, but there are 2 occasions, actually 3, but two that I remember very poignantly, where my mother and brother, within a year of each other, passed away. My brother was 41 years old. It was sudden and it was tragic. My mom, after struggling with multiple myeloma, passed away. And they both happened within a period of a year. And that time was incredibly dark for me. It was a really painful time. And in many ways, I just kind of shut down. And I remember going to be with the family. Most of them lived in Richmond, Virginia, about 350 miles from here. And trying to prepare to do the services and at the same time just grieve myself. It's a very difficult position when you're trying to oversee and take care of things like the memorial service and at the same time grieve your own personal loss. And I will never forget, several of you guys actually drove down to be with me in that time of my great need. You didn't spend much time, you didn't say a lot, but you drove down, you were with me, and when it was over, you went back. And I just remember feeling just the great depth of love and compassion. There were no words in that situation that were going to make it any better, but just simple presence is what really struck me. And so I say that just to say there are lingering images that I have in my mind of the gifts that I've received in my life, but the ones that I treasure the most are the ones that come with some level of sacrifice that the person who is giving the gift gave to me. Why do I say this? Well, we're at the end of this letter that the Apostle Paul has been writing. It's 4 chapters. It's very rich and full. He's been trying to instruct them because this group of people have been in a very difficult place. They've lost their joy and they're losing their faith, and he just doesn't want to see this happen. This was a church that he had helped to plant 10 years previous. He now finds himself in a Roman prison, and he's at the end of his life, and he's writing to them to give them some final instruction, but he really just wants to say thank you for all that they have done for him. Because you see, what they did for him, no other church that he ever helped plant did, and that is, they so were committed to supporting his ministry that at every point along the way, when they heard that he needed help, they came to his rescue. They were able to contribute in ways that helped him to continue to keep going. They met his basic needs. And the most significant thing about this final gift that they gave him is that he didn't even know that they knew where he was. He was languishing in prison at the end of his life. He thought he was alone. He felt very isolated. He had no idea that anybody even knew where he was, but they found out somehow. And they sent this guy, Epaphroditus, with some money to help him for food and clothing in a time where he needed it. The thing that makes it really, really unique is that they were at basically the edge of poverty themselves. They didn't give because they had to give. They gave from scarcity. And I think to myself, oh, that I wished that I could be like that. I tend to be more generous when I have more to give. But when I have little to give, my natural tendency is to protect and to hoard. And somehow, some way, they found out about him languishing in prison, and they took up an offering of the little that they had, and they gave it. They gave from scarcity, not from surplus. And Paul is blown away because once again, they have helped to provide for his needs in a way that no one else did. And so he's thanking them. It's a thank you letter that he writes them. And as he writes this letter, he gives them just a few final things that he wants them to know, a few final lessons that he wants them to learn, because as he's going to leave the earth, he knows that they're going to continue to have to wrestle and struggle with issues that are significant and pertinent in their life. And so as he continues through the last part of this letter, one of the things that he says to them, and this is important for you and I, he says, I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, whether it is with plenty or little. He says it twice. He says, I have learned. I have learned how to do this, which means it doesn't come natural. This isn't something that's easy. It doesn't just come to us in these spaces how to do what we do. So how is it that you get to this space where you learn how to live with nothing? Most of us, when we are lacking what it is that we desperately want, we ask God to help us get out of the situation. But that is not the prayer that Paul is praying. Paul is praying and seeking in the space that he's at to learn how to live in that situation with contentment, whether with a little or a lot. I think most of us, when we're looking at and we're thinking about our lives, we think to ourselves, when I get to this space, then I will be, right? How do I learn to be content in a space that I don't want to be? What if the space that I'm in, I'm going to stay for a very long time? What if I, in this space, am unable to understand how to navigate it, and the only response I have is such for me to be rescued? The idea in this space, Paul is saying, is that it's not when I get to this spot and then I will be. He said, no, now I have learned how to be content in this situation. So I wonder in this moment as you're thinking about your life as it is currently constructed, if it is exactly the way you want it to be. Anybody have their life at this moment exactly the way you want it to be? Is there nothing that you're lacking that you desire? So this is important because for you and I, if we are waiting for something to occur for our happiness level to increase, we may well be waiting a very long time. And in the process of waiting that very long time, we're going to waste a lot of days. And so Paul says, I've learned how. And so I would imagine his listeners in the place of their deep poverty are saying, please, please, tell me the secret. What is the secret of learning how to be content when I'm living in a space that I don't want to be in? Wouldn't you like to know? Yeah. He then gives them what is the secret to living in a place where you don't want to be for far longer than you wanted to be, but learning how, even in that space, to be content. He says, I have learned the secret in every situation. And then he says, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Now we see this verse in a lot of places. It may well be one of the most quoted verses in all of the Scriptures. We see it cross-stitched on pillows, on bumper stickers, tattooed on our bodies. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Now, what does that mean? When I was a kid growing up, I wished for many things. I wished that I had the strength to throw a 93-mile-an-hour splitter and bury it in the dirt, and one day pitch for the Red Sox and be on that championship team. Is that what he's saying? I have the strength to accomplish that? God did not wire or make me for that, unfortunately. God wired and made me for certain things. And upon my discovery of why God made me and what He made me for, the idea that myself or yourself, when in touch with the call for our purpose for being, that we could avail ourselves in a very real way for strength that is available to us, that helps us to navigate the struggles in our lives and to overcome the issues that really oftentimes keep us from God's best. That's what he's talking about. He says there is supernatural power available to you when you align your life with Christ. There is supernatural power available to you when you align your life with Christ. That means the things that we would oftentimes view as obstacles in our paths can ultimately become the vehicles by which God performs His greatest work. More often than not, when life gets difficult, we're looking for an exit ramp. We're looking for a way out. We're looking for a new door to walk through. Paul says, I used to think when and then, but now I think here and now. I used to think when I get out of prison, then I'll be happy. He said, now I think I can be happy even when I'm in prison. And the reason he has to learn this is because there are a variety of different seasons that will come and go. And if one season has to do with health challenges, for example, when we navigate that space and move into the next, maybe it's a relational challenge. And if it's not a relational challenge, maybe it's a financial challenge. In other words, in every season of life, there are going to be things that come our way that we're ultimately going to have to figure out how to deal with it. And Paul says, I'm not waiting until I get more money to be happy. I'm not waiting until I get free to be happy. I'm not waiting until this relationship gets fixed to be happy. I've learned how to be content in every situation. And what I have learned is that there is supernatural power available to me even in the places that I don't want to be. And I may stay there longer than I want to be, but I'm not waiting until I get out of this space in order for me to live my best life. Because I have available to me the absolute matchless power of Christ, that if I align myself, if I am in union with Christ, that doesn't really matter if I have a little bit or a lot. It doesn't really matter if my belly's full or if it's empty. He gives me the power in all situations to overcome. Does anybody remember what Paul's goal was? We talked about this in chapter 3. Paul's goal in life was to know Christ. It was to know Him and to experience the mighty power that raised Jesus from the dead. He says, I don't even mind if I have to suffer. He says, I want to suffer with Him. I'll share in His death if it means that I can experience the resurrection power and know His life. So he says, I'm not going to just look for the good. I'm going to take the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm going to take all of it because I believe that there's a resurrection coming for me. And when I align myself with the Christ, I'm going to experience the fullness of all that He has for me. So I'm not looking for when and then. It's here and now. I'm not going to waste another day. My life might not be as I want it to be, but it is what it is. And in this space, I'm going to look to align my life with Christ and find union with Him and overcome any and every situation because He's going to give me the strength that I need for today to handle what's in front of me. The secret is, it's not in our own power that we overcome these things. The secret is, it's that in the power that Christ gives us when we avail ourselves to Him. When we walk in union with Christ, we can face and overcome any situation that comes our way. And thereby, our obstacles become the vehicles of God's grace. So that bad relationship or that lack of resources, those are the very things that God can use to teach you contentment in all things. Isn't that amazing? That God can take the very worst and use it for good, can use it as a vehicle for grace in your life, can use it to help you to stop relying in your own strength and humbly admit that you need His help. And when you avail yourself to His help, He helps you in ways that you couldn't have imagined before you reached out to align yourself with Him in that way. As he gets to the end of the letter, he basically says, you guys have been so great. He says, right now, I have everything that I need. I feel generously supplied by God through you. And your offering to me has been a sweet-smelling sacrifice that is acceptable and pleasing to God. It's not only been a blessing to me, it has been honoring to the God you serve. He then says, know this, the same God who takes care of me will supply all of your needs from His glorious riches. And they have been given to us in Christ Jesus. The same God who takes care of me will take care of you. The same God who takes care of me. I'm not some super saint. What I have, you can have. The generosity, the blessing that's been poured out on my life, if you align your life with His, the same thing will happen to you. He gets to this space where He's thanking them and He's encouraging them. And I want to do the same with you as we get to the end of this series now. I know that some of you guys are in places you definitely don't want to be. And you've been there far longer than you would like to have imagined you would be. I want to encourage you not to let your circumstances dictate your mood. If you find yourself waiting until you get out of this space, you might find yourself waiting a very long time. But what if in the middle of your mess, you could find exactly what you needed, so that no matter how much longer you stayed in your mess, you could really be content. You could really sleep at night. You could really have peace in your heart and mind. You could really know the power of Christ. You could really experience what resurrection means. You could really know life and life to the full. I don't know how you experience this other than to be in a place where you would learn it. The thing is, when we hit these spaces, we just oftentimes aren't very willing students. We're not looking to learn. We're looking to get out. And Paul says, I've had to keep going through this over and over and over because I didn't get it in the beginning. I had to learn, I had to relearn, I had to learn, I had to relearn. When I got the whole finances thing down and I knew that God would be generous and that there would be provision for me, well then that's when the most significant relationship in my life began to fall apart. And then I had to relearn in that situation. Because no matter what the situation or circumstances, you can have what you want now. You don't have to wait. And so he said, your strength comes from God. Your strength comes from being rightly related to Christ. And that's why over the course of these 8 weeks, I've given you practices that create the space for God to meet you, to help you, for you to align your life. There's a part for God to do, but there's a part for you and I to do. It is a dance. We have to dance together. We have to work together if transformation is going to take place. Please don't let your circumstances dictate your mood. Because some of you are going to be sad and grumpy and difficult for a very long time if you do. It's time, instead of trying to figure it out, where you just relinquish your need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and just humble yourself and say, I lack the power that I need. Christ, come and help me in this space. Help me to navigate this space for as long as it takes. Help me in this space to learn what I need to learn so that when I leave this space, I'm a different person. And I don't have to relearn the same lesson. That's the problem with lessons. When we forget, we're given another opportunity to relearn. And so I couldn't think of a better way than to close this service by sharing in a time of communion together.